Hello, miladies of inestimable value. Never underestimate the silence of a woman who knows her worth, because that silence is often the loudest karma you'll ever hear. The Sigma female doesn't throw tantrums, she doesn't beg, and she doesn't chase. Instead, she does something far more unsettling. She walks away, and life itself starts punishing everyone who thought they could play with her. Psychology even proves it. When people lose access to someone who sets rare boundaries and radiates self-sufficiency, the brain registers it like withdrawal from a drug. That's why those who tried to manipulate, control, or diminish her end up twitching with regret, wishing they had just left her alone. See, the Sigma female doesn't need revenge, she becomes it. Her calm composure exposes others' chaos. Her boundaries expose their lack of discipline, and her independence exposes their crippling dependency. And the best part? She doesn't even have to lift a finger. The universe, or maybe just their own stupidity, does all the dirty work for her. So tonight, buckle up, because we're diving into the brutal reality of what happens when people mess with a Sigma female. Spoiler alert, karma doesn't just knock. It moves in, redecorates, and makes sure everyone involved wishes they had kept their hands, their words, and their games far, far away. Number 1. Her existence makes their excuses obsolete. Her very existence makes their excuses obsolete. And that is the part they hate the most. People who crossed a Sigma female often justified their behavior with excuses. Life is unfair. No one can really be that independent. You have to play dirty to win. But the Sigma female's life cancels out all those illusions. She shows, by simply being herself, that it's possible to walk away from toxic people and still thrive, to build without begging for validation, to succeed without performing for an audience. She doesn't preach it, she proves it, and that proof becomes the karma that burns. Those who tried to tear her down now find themselves trapped in the web of their own excuses. While they're stuck explaining why they haven't grown, why they couldn't resist gossip, or why they needed to rely on others to feel important, her progress leaves no room for sympathy. She forces them to face an uncomfortable truth. They didn't lack opportunity, they lacked courage. They didn't lack resources, they lacked discipline. They didn't lack love, they wasted it. And when she's standing there as living evidence that it can be done differently, their excuses sound childish, even to their own ears. That's the sting of karma here. It's not thunder crashing down on them. It's the quiet humiliation of realizing the Sigma female already lived through struggles tougher than theirs. And instead of crumbling, she used them as fuel. While they were busy playing games, she was outgrowing the entire arena. And now, when they try to justify themselves, the contrast between her reality and their excuses makes them look like clowns juggling reasons that no one buys anymore. What makes it worse is that she doesn't even gloat. She doesn't need to point fingers or remind them of what they did. Her very presence is enough to strip their defenses bare. When people see her thriving, when they hear her name mentioned with respect, when they notice she hasn't slowed down, it quietly kills every excuse they once leaned on. That's the kind of karma you can't escape. Being exposed not by her revenge, but by her undeniable proof that you could have been better, but chose not to be. Number 2, they realized they only borrowed her light. They realized they only borrowed her light, and that's a truth that hits harder than any direct revenge. When the Sigma female is around, people mistake the attention, respect, or credibility they receive as their own. Her presence elevates them without them even knowing it. Her energy gives weight to their words, her aura makes their circle appear more valuable, and her quiet power makes their influence seem bigger than it truly is. But the cruel twist is this. It was never theirs to begin with. It was borrowed glow, and the moment she steps away, the spotlight collapses with her absence. This is why the karma feels so suffocating. People who once strutted with borrowed confidence suddenly notice how quickly others stop paying attention when the Sigma female is no longer in the picture. Their jokes don't land, their charm feels flat, their authority evaporates. They realize they were not shining. They were being reflected. And now that the source of that reflection is gone, they're forced to stand on their own dim footing, naked in their true mediocrity. What makes this sting unbearable is the memory of how magnetic things felt when she was around. The Sigma female doesn't try to make people look better. It just happens because of the way she carries herself. Her presence raises the standard without effort. People orbit her, and anyone near her benefits from that gravitational pull. But when she's gone, the void becomes obvious, and those left behind can't replicate it. No matter how loud they try to be, they can't recreate the quiet power she brought into the room. That's the kind of karma you can't run from. The realization that the shine you flaunted was never yours. She doesn't need to expose you. Life does it for her. And while you scramble to hold on to fading relevance, she's already gone, glowing on her own terms, without ever needing the props, the crowd, or the approval you depended on. That's when it sinks in. You weren't the light. You were just basking in it. Number 3. Her refusal to break becomes their breaking point. Her refusal to break becomes their breaking point. And that's where the karma cuts the deepest. People who target a Sigma female usually come in with one expectation, that if they push hard enough, she'll eventually snap. They rely on the old tactics, emotional pressure, subtle manipulation, social games, or outright disrespect. They wait for the cracks to show, for her to lash out, to stumble, to collapse. But when she doesn't, when she absorbs the pressure with a kind of unshakable calm, the tables turn in the most brutal way. Each failed attempt starts to chip away at them, not her. They begin to realize that every insult fell flat, every scheme backfired, every rumor they spread fizzled out before it could stain her. What they thought would expose her weaknesses instead exposed their obsession. The more she remained unbothered, the more obvious their desperation became. That's when the real breaking begins, not hers but theirs. They can't handle the reflection of their own futility staring back at them. The irony is that the Sigma female doesn't even fight back in the way they expect. She doesn't throw tantrums, doesn't chase them down, doesn't waste her breath proving herself. She simply doesn't fold. And that quiet resilience feels heavier than any counterattack. Because how do you defeat someone who refuses to play your game? How do you control someone who won't bend no matter how many times you test her? That helplessness drives them to their own breaking point. And the fallout is ugly. They unravel in ways she never had to lift a finger to cause. They turn bitter, restless, suspicious of everyone around them, because if they couldn't break her, what does that say about their supposed power? Her endurance leaves a scar on their ego, one they can't heal. And while they spiral, she continues on, unbroken, reminding them silently that the only person who fell apart in the battle was them. Number 4. She forces them into self-comparison. She forces them into self-comparison, and that's a war they can't win. The Sigma female doesn't brag, she doesn't shove her wins in anyone's face, but her progress is impossible to ignore. She moves forward with a quiet determination, stacking results in plain sight without needing applause. And that's what makes it brutal for the people who once tried to tear her down. They have no choice but to measure themselves against her, and every time they do, they come up short. What stings the most is the simplicity of it. She's not working twice as hard to prove a point. She's just consistent, disciplined, and unwilling to waste time on games. Meanwhile, the same people who mocked her, doubted her, or tried to distract her are left realizing they've been running in circles while she was building something lasting. Their excuses start to sound hollow even to themselves. She got lucky. She must have had help. She's just different. Deep down, they know the truth. It's not luck, it's not favors, it's not magic. It's that she chose the harder road while they chose shortcuts that led nowhere. The resentment grows because self-comparison is a mirror they can't escape. Every milestone she hits forces them to confront their own stagnation. Every boundary she sets reminds them of the ones they never had the courage to enforce. Every ounce of independence she embodies highlights their dependence on validation. They don't just see her success, they see their failure written in the contrast. And the cruel twist, she never asked them to compete in the first place. She's too focused on her own path to look sideways, but they can't stop looking at her. They track her every move, not out of admiration, but out of desperation to understand why they feel smaller whenever her name comes up. And the more they compare, the more bitter they become. That's the karma right there, being haunted by the progress of the very person they tried to break. Her success becomes their measuring stick, and with every inch she climbs, their inadequacy screams louder. She doesn't have to lift a finger. Their own envy does the job for her. Number 5. Every attack turns into her testimony. Every attack turns into her testimony, and that's the kind of karma no one ever sees coming. The people who go after a Sigma female assume that the more pressure they apply, the weaker she'll appear. They expect her to bend under gossip, to crumble when excluded, to doubt herself after constant criticism. But what they don't understand is that every push against her only amplifies her resilience. Instead of silencing her, their efforts become the evidence that she can't be broken. It's almost cruel how it works. The rumors meant to destroy her credibility end up proving how much she intimidates people just by existing. The games meant to isolate her only highlight how comfortable she is on her own. The criticism that was supposed to shame her becomes the backdrop against which her growth looks even more impressive. Each attempt to tear her down adds another layer to her story, making her stronger, not weaker. And while they're busy plotting her downfall, they don't realize they're the ones building her legend brick by brick. That's why the karma hit so heavy. They thought they were writing her ending, but all they did was help craft her testimony. People watching from the sidelines see her endurance, her composure, her ability to walk through fire without begging for mercy. And instead of seeing her as a victim, they start to see her as untouchable. That shift in perception is devastating for her enemies because it means their attacks didn't just fail, they backfired and made her unforgettable. And the Sigma female never has to lift a sword. Her silence, her refusal to collapse, her ability to stay grounded through storms, that's the victory. She doesn't need to shout about her strength. They've already shouted it for her through the very lengths they went to try and bring her down. The more they fight her, the more undeniable her strength becomes. In the end, the only testimony their attacks leave behind is proof that she was always far greater than they imagined, and that they were the ones who underestimated her into her legend. Number 6. They realize they were never the main character. They realize they were never the main character. And that's the reality check they never prepared for. People who clash with a Sigma female often operate under the illusion that they hold some central place in her life. They expect her to revolve around their approval, their rejection, their attention, or even their betrayal. In their minds, they are the anchor, the reason her story unfolds the way it does. But the Sigma female dismantles that illusion in the most brutal way possible, by continuing on as if they never mattered. When she doesn't orbit anyone, the impact is jarring. Her world doesn't pause when they leave, her progress doesn't stutter when they withhold support, and her identity doesn't dissolve when they try to erase her. Instead, she keeps moving forward, building, evolving, living. That's when it hits them. They were background characters all along, mistaking themselves for the lead role. The narrative they thought revolved around them was just a small footnote in her much larger story. The devastation comes not just from being cut out, but from realizing they were never written in as essential to begin with. That's a level of irrelevance most people can't stomach. To know that someone you tried to control doesn't even flinch when you're gone, that's a wound to the ego deeper than confrontation. They expected tears, collapse, or at least some visible dent. Instead, they're met with indifference, and indifference is a harsher punishment than hate. The Sigma female doesn't deliver this blow with malice. It's just who she is, self-contained, self-driven, self-sufficient. But that very independence becomes the mirror that shatters their illusions. They see her thriving without them and are forced to face a truth they can't spin. Her story was never theirs to control. And while she moves on effortlessly, they remain stuck replaying the same scene in their heads, angry that they were never the protagonist in her life, just an extra whose role expired long before they were ready to exit. Number 7. Their manipulation backfires into transparency. Their manipulation backfires into transparency, and that's the part that eats them alive. When people set traps for a Sigma female, they expect her to walk straight into them, blind, naive, and easy to corner. They imagine her tripping over their lies, falling for their guilt trips, or being seduced by their false charm. But the Sigma female's strength lies in her ability to see patterns others ignore. She doesn't just dodge the trap, she exposes the hand that set it. The irony is brutal. Every little scheme they thought was clever ends up being a confession. The guilt trip doesn't make her feel guilty, it makes them look manipulative. The silent treatment doesn't shake her, it highlights how childish they are. The lies they spin don't confuse her, they reveal exactly what they're afraid of. By resisting their control, she unintentionally turns their every move into evidence of desperation. What was meant to be a game of control becomes a public display of weakness. It's like shining a flashlight in a dark room. Suddenly, everyone can see their motives laid bare. The insecurity behind their need to dominate, the fear driving their attempts to corner her, the emptiness behind their fake confidence. The more they try to cover their tracks, the clearer the footprints become. Instead of her stumbling, they're the ones exposed, their playbook open for all to see. And that exposure is permanent. Once someone sees how predictable you really are, the spell is broken. She doesn't need to fight, argue, or prove anything. Her refusal to be manipulated is enough to strip away their mask. That's the real karma. They built elaborate traps, only to end up trapped in the transparency of their own tactics. While they're busy scrambling to hide their desperation, she's already moved forward, untouchable, leaving them standing in the wreckage of a strategy that revealed more about them than it ever did about her. Number 8. Her refusal to compete leaves them looking desperate. Her refusal to compete leaves them looking desperate, and that's the twist that destroys them from the inside out. Most people thrive on comparison. They want to prove they're smarter, richer, louder, or more admired. They build their self-worth on beating someone else in a contest, even if that contest only exists in their own heads. When they cross paths with a Sigma female, they assume she'll play along, that she'll fight for attention, validation, or approval like everyone else. But she doesn't. She simply steps out of the race entirely, and that's what makes their effort look ridiculous. There's nothing more humiliating than competing with someone who isn't even trying. While they claw for recognition, chase trends, and scramble for applause, she's moving in silence, uninterested in proving anything. That indifference eats away at them, because it exposes how addicted they are to validation, and how dependent their identity is on winning. Without her participation, their victories feel hollow. Who are you really beating when the one person you wanted to outshine doesn't care enough to show up? Her quiet withdrawal also magnifies their desperation. The harder they push to stand out, the more obvious it becomes that they're trying too hard. Their achievements, once meant to humble her, suddenly look like overcompensation. Their need to be seen starts to feel like begging, especially when compared to her calm ability to thrive without an audience. It's not that she refuses to compete out of fear, it's that she doesn't need the validation they're all addicted to. That contrast is devastating, because it forces them to face an ugly truth. They're not strong without competition, and she's stronger precisely because she doesn't need it. The karma here is simple but sharp. In trying to beat her, they only reveal how small they are without her acknowledgement. Every desperate attempt to prove themselves only circles back to highlight her refusal to play the game at all. And in the end, the race they thought they were winning collapses into something pathetic, because the one person who could have given it meaning walked away, leaving them to celebrate a victory that doesn't matter. Number 9. They discover she can't be replaced. They discover she can't be replaced. And that's when the regret sinks its teeth in. At first, people who underestimate a Sigma female convince themselves she's just another face, another option, another character in their story who can be swapped out without consequence. They assume her presence is interchangeable, that once she's gone, they'll quickly fill the space with someone louder, easier, or more agreeable. But when the dust settles, they're hit with the truth. The void she leaves behind is not just empty, it's irreplaceable. What makes it sting harder than rejection is the realization that her value wasn't loud or flashy. It was woven into the small, unspoken ways she impacted everything. She didn't demand attention, yet her presence gave the room weight. She didn't constantly check in, yet when she spoke, her words carried balance and perspective. She didn't smother people with effort, yet her quiet consistency was a rare kind of loyalty. Once she's gone, all of that disappears at once, and the replacement attempts feel like eating candy after losing a feast. It looks sweet, but it never fills. The people who dismissed her only realized too late that she's not the kind of woman you get over. She's the kind that lingers in the back of your mind every time you try to replicate her presence. No matter how many people they surround themselves with, none of them carry her depth, her clarity, her refusal to shrink just to fit in. The comparison is inevitable and cruel, because every new face only makes the absence more obvious. That's the karma they never saw coming. Not her anger, not her revenge, but the permanent ache of knowing they'll never encounter someone quite like her again. They didn't just lose her. They lost access to a presence that can't be manufactured, bought, or copied. And the cruelest twist, she doesn't lose a thing. She moves forward, complete in herself, while they're left replaying the mistake that cost them someone irreplaceable. Number 10. Their power games collapse without her participation. Their power games collapse without her participation, and that's the most humiliating karma of all. Power only works when there's someone to dominate, someone to control, someone to bend beneath the pressure. People who try to pull a Sigma female into their games rely on the idea that she'll resist, argue, or fight back, because resistance still gives them power. But when she refuses to play altogether, when she simply walks away instead of engaging, the entire structure of their identity falls apart. The cracks show fast. Without her participation, their threats lose weight. Their manipulations feel theatrical. Their authority looks hollow. They built their sense of strength on the idea of having an opponent to subdue. But when the Sigma female doesn't give them that role, they're exposed as people clinging to power that doesn't exist without validation. Suddenly, the control they thought they had is revealed for what it really was, just smoke and mirrors dependent on her response. And this is what breaks them, the silence. She doesn't rise to the bait, doesn't scramble to defend herself, doesn't feed the fire. Her absence from the game forces everyone else to see how artificial the rules really were. The supposed leader looks like a fool, yelling into an empty arena. The manipulator looks desperate, trying to pull strings that lead nowhere. The power itself, without her involvement, dissolves into dust. The karma here is sharp, but subtle. They don't just lose the fight, they lose the illusion that they ever had power in the first place. That realization cuts deeper than defeat, because defeat means you had a worthy opponent. Collapse means you never had any real standing at all. And while they wrestle with that emptiness, the Sigma female moves forward untouched, proving that the greatest way to win against a power game is not to play it. Number 11. Her growth outpaces their stagnation. Her growth outpaces their stagnation, and that's where karma delivers its most brutal blow. While they were wasting time plotting against her, gossiping about her, and inventing little games to distract her, she was quietly leveling up. Every setback they tried to create became fuel for her discipline. Every door they tried to close pushed her to build her own, and every attempt to belittle her only sharpened her resolve. They thought they were slowing her down, but in reality, they were standing still while she was running laps. What makes this sting unbearable is the permanent gap that forms. At first, they might have thought they were on the same level, maybe even ahead of her, but her consistent growth creates distance so wide that one day they wake up and realize they're not even in the same league anymore. She's moved into new rooms, built new connections, and created new opportunities, while they're stuck recycling the same petty habits. The comparison is no longer side by side, it's top to bottom, and they're staring up at someone they once tried to hold down. This is where their resentment festers. Watching her ascend means being confronted with the fact that they wasted their energy. All that scheming, all that plotting, all that obsession, it bought them nothing but wasted time. Meanwhile, her results speak louder than any defense she could give. She doesn't need to clap back or remind them of what they did. Her success is the reminder, and it's merciless because every win she secures underlines how much further behind they've fallen. The cruelest part? They can never close the gap. Growth isn't something you fake or fast-track. It's built through years of choices, consistency, and resilience. By the time they realize they should have been working on themselves instead of targeting her, it's already too late. The distance is permanent, and the regret is crushing. That's the karma. While they were busy trying to break her, they unknowingly broke themselves by standing still. And now, she's untouchable. Not because she fought them, but because she outgrew them so completely they can't even reach her shadow. Number 12. The mirror. They didn't want to face. The mirror they didn't want to face. That's what a Sigma female becomes for those who try to undermine her. Most people are comfortable pointing fingers, projecting flaws onto others, and hiding their insecurities behind criticism. But when they encounter her, it doesn't work. She doesn't play along with the projections, doesn't shrink to make them feel taller, doesn't bend to fit their narratives. Instead, her presence quietly reflects them back to themselves, and what they see is not flattering. Being around her strips away illusions. The envy they try to disguise suddenly feels exposed. The neediness they mask with bravado becomes obvious. The insecurity they bury under loud performances bubbles to the surface. They came looking for flaws in her, but instead they're forced to wrestle with their own reflection, jealous, fragile, dependent. And that's a kind of confrontation most people can't stomach. It's one thing to dislike someone else, it's another to realize that what you dislike is actually a magnified version of your own weakness. That's where the resentment begins to grow. They don't hate her because she wronged them, they hate her because she makes their excuses impossible. She doesn't gossip, so their pettiness feels louder. She doesn't chase validation, so their desperation for attention looks pathetic. She doesn't waver in solitude, so their fear of being alone seems childish. She never points these things out directly, but her existence does it for her. That silent exposure is worse than any insult because you can't argue with a mirror. And here's the twist of karma. They can walk away from her, but they can't walk away from what they saw in themselves while standing next to her. The image lingers, the contrast burns, and the truth gnaws at them long after she's gone. Her strength doesn't just highlight their weakness. It forces them to admit that their battles were never with her, but with themselves. And that's the kind of truth no one can escape, no matter how far they run. The Sigma female isn't someone you can control, break, or outshine. She moves through life on her own terms, unshaken by manipulation, immune to drama, and untouched by the petty games of those who try to diminish her. Every attack against her, every scheme, every attempt to hold her back only becomes a testament to her strength. While others stagnate in obsession and envy, she grows, evolves, and thrives quietly, effortlessly, untouchable. Those who tried to harm her discover truths they weren't ready to face. That they were never the main character in her story. That their influence was borrowed and fleeting. That their power games and manipulations collapse without her participation. They are forced to confront themselves in ways they never anticipated, wrestling with envy, insecurity, and inadequacy, while she walks on, indifferent and unstoppable. Karma doesn't need to announce itself. Her existence alone exposes their failures, their desperation, and their mediocrity. Every slight, every betrayal, every attempt to break her comes back not as her vengeance, but as the undeniable consequences of their own choices. The Sigma female proves that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it is calm, silent, and uncompromising. It is independence that burns brighter than revenge. It is resilience that turns attacks into legend. It is refusal to compete, refusal to bend, and refusal to apologize for being extraordinary. And in the end, those who tried to limit her are left grappling with a truth they can't escape. She cannot be replaced, she cannot be controlled, and she cannot be matched. She moves forward while they are left staring at the echoes of their own mistakes. So remember this: underestimating a Sigma female doesn't just fail. It builds the very legend you tried to destroy. Her power is quiet, her victory is inevitable, and the lesson she leaves behind is one of relentless, unstoppable karma. If this resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss content that exposes the truth and uncovers power like this. Like the video if you felt the impact, comment below with your thoughts or experiences. Let's hear how the Sigma energy has played out in your life, and don't forget to share this with someone who needs to understand the unstoppable force of a Sigma female. Your support helps us keep delivering the real, raw, and extraordinary insights you won't find anywhere else.